So the last time I did a Bible class, I remember, I guess I don't remember exactly what it was about, but I remember thinking that I was really worried that the audience, the congregation, was going to have a lot to say about it. I don't feel that way about pride. I feel like most of us have something to say about it. And I think probably it's because most of us have some type of experience with pride. I would say that probably everybody in here has dealt with pride in one way or another, whether it be good or bad, whether it be in your own family or in your own life or maybe in someone that you love, that this has become an issue. And it's kind of the beginning of a list of categories that we're going to go into after this in this book of overcoming sin. We started talking about the nature of sin and how we overcome it, and then it talks about the lust of the flesh, and then we talk about some individual sins that are listed out in the Scriptures, and pride starts it off. And then it goes into anger, worry, covetousness, hypocrisy, gossip, fear, so on and so forth. And I think that it's meaningful that pride starts this, because one of the things that even the book said that I've thought about before is that there is no sin that, and if you can think of one, I would love to hear it, but if there is no sin that you can commit in this life that doesn't have its root source back to some type of pride or selfishness. Because in reality, when we commit sin, we are doing something that we want to do. I want to do this. I want to engage in this activity. That is pride. That is thinking that my way is better. The word pride, as we know it, has 100 different meanings. If you look up the definition, depending on the context that you're using it in, there's all kinds of ways that the word pride is used. In the Bible, though, and I didn't find one that differed from what the book said. If you read that, pride is always talked about in the negative sense, because it's always in reference to ourselves and not giving glory to God. It says there in the beginning of the intro, it says multiple definitions. When we think of it now, and most of the time when we use it today, we use it in a positive sense. We take pride in things like a job well done. We tell our children we are proud of them. And then it says that the second paragraph, an over-high opinion of oneself, exaggerated self-esteem, conceit, arrogance. Negative pride develops with an exaggerated view of one's self-worth. And then it says it's interesting to know that it's never used in a positive sense. Instead, it warns us to overcome it and warns us against pride. So, besides arrogance and conceit, I think that we use pride, like I said, most of the time, unless we're talking about something spiritual, we use it in a positive sense. And I think that there are a lot of times in which we justify being proud of things that maybe are good in and of themselves, but who are we giving glory to? And I think that that's where this is sourced from, and I think that's why the Scriptures warn against it so much. There's some, interesting quotes or I guess anecdotes or whatever that maybe some of you have heard, some of you, I've seen it on marker boards at different offices I've been to, that, kind of have this idea of thinking too highly about yourself. One says, you'll become way less concerned with what other people think of you when you realize how often they're not. One said, at age 20, we worry about what others think of us. At age 40, we don't care what they think of us. At age 60, we discover they haven't been thinking of us at all. And then the last one is, no one is thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves, just like you. And so those things are kind of, I know that they're a little bit tongue-in-cheek, and the idea of no one thinking about us or you're not thinking of anyone else, I know that isn't the concept of being a Christian. We're to think of others and to love others. But we are engrossed in a society, and I don't think that this is anything necessarily new. Maybe the message is a little more prevalent. But we're engrossed in a society in which self-love and it's all about self-worth, and you need to think highly of yourself. And although that there is a portion of that in its core that I think is good, that we can't be too down on ourselves, it becomes this idea of we don't need anybody else. We are great, we are wonderful, and that clouds us. Okay, maybe we don't need people to build us up, but then we don't need God to build us up. We don't need any help from anybody. When I was trying to think of scriptures that talked about pride in a positive sense, because it was just so hard for me, this idea that a parent, if they were to say that they were proud, okay, well, man, the Bible doesn't say anything about being prideful. Is that okay? In 2 Corinthians, what does Paul continue to boast about? Christ. We are allowed to have pride, but it is only in God. That is the only... And I want you to think about something, and this is, again, as if you can think of something, maybe I'm not getting it, but think of anything good in your life or that has been positive or that you are happy about, that you could say, I am proud of this, that cannot be sourced back to God. He is the giver of all things good. Man, I'm happy for my family. Who's the source of that? God. Man, I'm happy for this congregation. That's God. I'm happy for my job. Oh, well, in reality, yes, maybe I went to school and I applied for this. All of those blessings are given to us from God. All of them. We may not directly say that we're the source. He's the source. Okay, I'm able to eat an apple today. That's from God. Yes, in reality, God has created that. He has given that to me, that nutrition, that ability to be able to eat. All of those things go back to God. So, when it comes to what, and in Psalm 125, I think, that talks about, what does it say about the man who has many children, a quiver full of them? What does he say his life is? Does anybody know? Happy. Happy is the man, blessed is the man who has a quiver full of them. I would think that we may use a different word, but if you have children who are obedient to the gospel, that is something to be proud of. But where does it go back to? Because I think that can be a danger in the church. I think it can be a danger among Christians, is that you have children who are obedient, that live and are doing right, and a parent who raised them in a godly way can start to think, man, I did a really good job. This was, I know that they've had their issues, but I did a really good job raising them. And they may not say that out loud, but that mentality kind of comes across in maybe the way that they talk to people. Instead of, a young person comes up to them and they say, hey, I'd like to, get some advice. Well, I did it this way. Well, no, the Scripture says that this is a good idea. You can say this is how we followed it, but there's this mentality, I think, that can come across of, it's all about me. Look what I did. Look what I did. And sadly to say, oftentimes, and not all the time, but oftentimes, those are the parents that are taken down at the knees when a child falls away, when something happens that they didn't expect, and they question everything. And the reason is because they had their pride in themselves and not in God. Because if the pride is in God, in what He has given us, in the Word in which He has bestowed upon us, then we cannot fail. We just can't. That's the reassurance that He's told us. We cannot fail with Him. And so, I know that although the Bible, the Scriptures don't talk about pride in a positive way, there are, I guess you could say, maybe allusions to that idea of being of having pride, but it's only towards God and what He has given us. Because in 1 Thessalonians, when Paul is talking, 1 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 4, when he's talking, he says, I boast of you among the churches of God. There were people that Paul was proud of because they were obedient to God. It wasn't in their own accomplishments. It wasn't in their own individual merits or anything like that. It was because they were obedient to God. It's kind of a long intro, and I think that, like I said, I think that that pride is the source of, at least selfishness is the source of every sin that we commit. And I think that you could probably go back to that each time. Before we get into this, what are how are some ways that parents can hinder their children with this idea of pride? Anybody? Yeah. To what? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, if that idea that they are above it in some way is taught, then it's definitely going to echo down. Yeah.
Well, there's a fine line between teaching others and teaching your children confidence and pride. I mean, you can have confidence in your faith and all that without being proud of it. And just the opposite of pride is humility, realizing that you have a blessing. Thank you, God, for it, and realize, you acknowledge it. You're not an Ehor that everything's bad. You acknowledge the blessings that you have, but you're humbled by it instead of proud of it.
Okay. Jason?
You're setting them up to fall, because after pride comes a fall. So if you instill that attitude in them, you're setting them up to fail and fall.
Yeah, I think the first verse that's listed here, that pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. Yeah.
I think this is what you're asking. But, when we're training our kids, we need to train them that you do this because you're a Christian, not because you're bold. I think sometimes we put, the focus on our family, and you're going to do this because this is how we do it. I think that develops a pride instead of being a Christian. We do this because we're Christians, and that's giving the credit to the source from God, and not giving the credit to myself through my kids. Because I think, I've thought about this a lot. Like, I want them to, do things because it pleases God, not because it pleases me. And it's going to take humility to give that credit to God instead of want to take it. Because if that's the case, then they'll grow up, wanting that instead of being proud and humans.
Yeah, and I don't think that I probably have to tell anyone here that a great deal of teaching to your children is done without saying a word, in the sense of the way that they watch you with other people, how you interact with different things, how you talk about work, how you talk about things, in which they recognize certain mannerisms or a certain mentality that their parents have towards something. And because most children, believe that their parents are, and hopefully they are good and right and righteous, that these things are acceptable. And so when they do them, they may, mimic those things in their own life, not even knowing the cause or the reason that they're doing it, but they've seen their parents do it, and that's why they do it. So not even necessarily saying anything. But, there's this idea and that parents are, I'm trying to think how I should say this. I think that there is a mentality that can sometimes be talked about or discussed, in which especially parents who are members of the church or part of the church are too hard on their children. And I'm not going to go into all the details, but just the idea that they can be too hard on them. And then the opposite of those in the world are very encouraging, and they build up their children. And so you have this balance of, okay, well, we need to be more like them, and they need to be more like us, because they let their children do anything, and we restrict them from doing things. Without going into, the proper balance, I think that that's something that you should study and figure out on your own. The idea that we build children up so much that they put all of their assurance and confidence in themselves. And what happens oftentimes is that they get removed from the team that they thought they were really good at. They don't get to participate in something or whatever, and it crushes them. And the reason is because their parent or whoever has encouraged them and over and over and over again told them, this is what you're good at. And this is where you need to excel. This is where you need to thrive. If it's sourced in God, it cannot fail. That's it. It just goes back to that. Put your faith, your hope, and your love in God. And that pride that we have of being confident is in our salvation. And when we have that, it comes across in everything that we do. Because most of you, whether it be highs or lows, or you struggle with this, or you're good at it, when you are confident in one thing, it makes you confident in other things. I will say, when I am being very diligent, and it's been a while, but when I am being very diligent about eating right and working out, I am better at work. I'm happier at home. I'm better at taking care of things around the house. Have nothing to do with working out. But why is it? It's because I feel better about myself. That's a small example of what God tells us, that if you put your faith in me, if you put all of your worries, all of your cares on my shoulders, you can be this free. You can be this happy. Because you'll see this life is a vapor. It doesn't matter. All of these things don't matter, and it makes you happy. Now, I say that from here as if I have it figured out. I don't. I know that's the source. But it's difficult at times. And so I know that, when we talk to our children about, you've probably been around parents or people that are like, everybody on their team is just really bad. But my team, my kid is really good. I mean, I know people say that, but my kid is really good. I mean, if it wasn't for them, they probably wouldn't have a ball team, whoever it is. And then you talk to someone else on the team, and their parent is thinking the same thing. And they say this in front of their kid. Man, you really excelled today. If it wasn't for you, y'all would have lost. And you saying this over and over and over again, and that kid is going up to his teammates, and he's kind of, like, y'all wouldn't be anything without me. And I know that's kind of comical, but it happens. I know that I've heard it, and this is different. I know Boston's probably going to be the best at everything she does. But that's different. She's different. But we all know that. We've been around people that think that. And they're not even saying it in a funny way. They're actually saying, no, my kid is literally the best. It may be true, but is it good to say? Because if they're the best, it's going to be shown. It's going to show itself. So you don't really have to. I think that is what most of us understand when we are around people who are talented in anything, is that they never have to tell you. You just see it. Most of the people that tell you about how good they are, it's kind of that red flag. Okay, why are you telling me? It's like someone that says, I never brag. Well, okay, it's kind of a weird thing to say, I never brag, I never talk about myself. You're doing it as you say it. You don't have to do that. Your efforts should speak, for themselves. Does anybody have anything on that? Yeah.
I love how we're talking and have moved this about children and parenting. Since we're talking about sports and athletics, I always gave 3 rules to our children in being involved. And they were, listen to your coach, do your best, and have fun. And the thought about doing that was from a biblical standpoint. If I'm listening to my coach,
a good point. Chris? Yeah. And, we've seen examples just in the world, of different maybe athletes or stars or celebrities or whatever that have been, at the top of their game, that very successful, and an accident happens or something happens in their life in which they are either, hospitalized or handicapped in some way in which, and oftentimes they talk about this mindset of they thought that it was, all about them, and this has really brought them down. And you don't wish that upon, anyone, obviously, evil upon anyone. And I think that the same goes with how we are, towards our life. The error that Christians can sometimes have of this idea of so many generations of Christians in my life. I have, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents who have always been members of the church, and they tell someone that not just kind of a history of how this church came to be, but kind of as a bullet point on their resume of who they are. Then that kind of goes to someone's head of well, I know that you're good, but you haven't been. I mean, I've got 6 generations of the church in my lineage, and someone might think that that's kind of ridiculous. It happens. It's said sometimes in a way of like, well, I know a little bit more. I'm a little bit better, and it can be harmful to both the person hearing that and to the person thinking that, because when someone falls away, then they realize that it's not all about who that was or anything like that. Anything else? Yep.
It's possible to do this. I've been humbled by a 10 or a 12-year-old at this congregation. I can't remember how old he was. And I said, hey, I hear you're really, really good at such and such sport.
I was 10.
He just looks at me and says, do what?
I said I was 10.
Cross country.
Yeah.
And he says, sir, he said, it takes a whole team to be really good.
Yeah.
Something like that. And I was just like, whoa.
Yeah. That's when you see humility, especially in young people who are very talented at something, it stands out. I mean, I think most of us, we remember the ones who are very, humble about their abilities at a young age because it's so rare. So anyway, it goes into, this lesson talks about problems with pride and then how to overcome pride in certain situations. But it talks about this first one, pride brings destruction, and it mentions this verse in Proverbs chapter 16 and verse 18. It says, pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. What does this mean? In your own words. And you can use the book and its summary too. If you say that, it'll be okay. Yeah. Jason? Isn't it so weird, and this is a side note, how you think of something and then the next comment is exactly what you think of, and you're just like, how did they know? That was exactly what I was thinking of, and I didn't have it written down. But how many characters in the Old Testament were brought down, like had this issue of, whether they were very wealthy or very rich or very powerful or whatever it was, had built themselves up to a certain level in which God had brought them down. Maybe not God directly, but God using someone else to bring them down or to show them kind of their place. I'm going to put you in your place. And I always think, and many of you probably do, about the parable in the New Testament about the man who builds, the barns. I always think about that. He had so much that he had to build more barns. And I always thought, man, when I was younger, I thought, if you ever see somebody with a bunch of barns, steer clear because it's coming. But it wasn't the idea that he had somewhere to store his goods or he was successful and he was able to store it. What was it? Why was he struck down? It wasn't the fact that he had good crops. What was it? Yeah. He said, look at what you've done. Look at what I've accomplished. And if you ever find yourself in that mentality, I think that's, kind of a good check. Stop, look at yourself. Because just like anything, I think that the temptation of pride can be more prevalent or easier for some to fall into than others. And that's just reality. In the same way that any sin, you may not struggle with it, but your friend does, and you struggle with theirs, and they don't really understand how you struggle with it because it's so easy for them. I don't have an issue with pride or that just, I don't get why that's so difficult for you, but with you it's something else or anything like that. So on the other side of that, you have this idea of humility. We know that that's the opposite of pride, that we should be humble. And the Scriptures talk about humility and the way that we should be humble not only before God, but with one another, that if someone comes to us and they tell us something that we need to correct in our life, that we have a humble heart and that we're willing to listen and make that correction if it's needed. Because a lot of times that's where you'll see a lot of pride between Christians is when one goes to the other and tells them, hey, I think that, this is something I noticed and I want you to be aware of. What happens oftentimes? Well, hey, you need to kind of worry about yourself because I saw this too, where you need to be careful because I know that, I may not be right, but, and so we have to be humble, and that's obviously what the Scriptures teach. But with humility, there can be this idea that we are so humble that we are, kind of like what Scott said, so down on ourselves all the time that we never can do anything good. Hey, that was a really good prayer. It wasn't. I didn't say it how I planned on it. Hey, you did a good job leading singing. Did you hear me mess up in the second verse? It's just I'm the worst or whatever. And that idea that you can never tell them anything good, and oftentimes people will stop telling them compliments because they don't take it right or whatever. But that's not to say that that's a good attribute. Someone's trying to encourage you and you're telling them how bad you are. Just say thank you. So the idea of humility, yes, I think that if you're going to err on one side, maybe that's the better side to err on, but it's still not good to be so down on yourself because what you'll do is you'll think that could feed into, I'm really not deserving of God and His grace and what He's given me because I'm just so bad. I've done so much, and and granted, none of us deserve it, but God shouldn't give this to me, and it can feed over into things that are more serious. Randy? Yeah. Right. Yeah, and even the mentality of Paul, it's not like if anybody could have lived the rest of his life down on himself for what he had done, could have been Paul. I mean, to the point of killing people and putting them in prison, Paul could have been very hard on himself, but he got over it. Not in the sense of thinking it wasn't wrong, but he moved on and put all of his pride in God, in Christ, and his ability to be able to preach and teach the message. Yep.
I think Jeremiah's lesson was a good way into all this because, when we seek God in prayer, when we're constantly seeking God in prayer, like King Asa forgot to do in the 11 years ago, he, decided to depend upon himself and he kind of slipped it in without even realizing it, But if we're in constant prayer, this pride is not, that alleviates pride because you're looking to God, you're constantly going to God, you're giving things to God, you aren't looking within yourself. And so, to me, King Asa is one of the first things I always think about, who lived such a, good life, and then in the end, he quit praying, he quit going, quit seeking God's wisdom. As long as we're constantly doing that, that's going to be a big cure to when our prayer life's off.
Yeah.
That's going to be a big cure to pride.
Yeah. Them.
So in Acts 12, we read of Herod, when he went to Nebuchadnezzar. Herod in 21 put on his royal apparel, took his seat on the judgment seat, and began delivering an address. And the people cried out, "The voice of God, not of man." And the next verse, "And the angel of the Lord struck him down because he did not give God the glory, and he died." Right? So to Randy's point, thinking of ourselves less, anything we can do, back to your initial comment, is because God gave us the ability to do that. So where's it at? Where's our focus? Are we giving God the glory for the things that we can do? And then we're thinking less of ourselves at that point. We're giving the glory to the right spot.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I think why it's so difficult for us, and I don't know this is my own speculation, but why it can be so difficult for us to truly give God the credit for everything is because what God has given us and promised us through salvation isn't something tangible that we can literally hold in our hand and see the goods of it. It's something that we look forward to, and we see the effects of a good, righteous Christian life, in our life. But it's not something like other things where I work really hard and I get $100 and I can hold that $100, I can take that and I can purchase something, I can hold that in my hand, and that's something I can literally be proud of, that I worked hard and I gained this. And so when it's not in front of our face or before us all the time, we forget about it. We don't think about it. We think that this is something we are doing instead of that this is really from God. The fact that we have any ability to do anything, and the fact that we are in the country that we are in, and the opportunities that we have here are, something that until you go somewhere else or you see the way other people are living, you often, don't truly understand how good we have it. Yeah.
I think sometimes in life we can struggle through something or work really hard toward a goal so hard that we pour everything into it, we feel like. And we may succeed, but I think where the problem comes with that, and I don't want to lose my breath.
Here you go.
What we end up doing, though, if we don't allow God to help bear the burdens of those struggles to get where we are, then we put it on us that we got there. Yeah, you may have gotten, you may have gotten there by working your tail end off or something. You want to say that, and that's fine. But I think that more importantly, you get more pride in a way by asking God to help you get there and achieving the goal that way. Because then you know that that's where it came from. Yeah, you're a hard worker, okay? You're a hard worker, but you didn't do that on your own.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think it's so much easier for people to give God the glory. You allow Him to come with you, beside you. That's all He wants us to do, is just to ask.
Yeah. Ask. I agree, and I couldn't have said it better.
Take it on yourself. then there's a sense that the devil puts in you of the pride that you can do it without Him. You can't, dude, because I promise you, that next big struggle, you may fall on your face.
Yeah, and then you won't know what to do or where to go. And if you think about it, no matter what you accomplish in this life, whatever it is, the fact that you were able to live that life with the health that you had, the family, the support, whatever it is, the fact that you were able to do that is all from God. It is all from God. That's the source. Everything that is good is from God. And when we give Him thanks and we give Him glory, then we're not... He tells us so many things, and it's kind of like you can imagine. I can't imagine, I know that Boston's only 2. I've been around, I guess, longer than some, but I've seen with parents, you hear a parent tell a child something and you just wish they could see it. You want them to understand it. Like, don't do this. It's going to harm you. It's going to harm you. And they do it, and it makes you sad. It makes you upset. God has been telling us over and over, put your worries, put your cares on me. I want to help. And we often think, I know He says that, but on this one, I can do it. I can do this one by myself. Now, yes, on the big things, on the major things, I'm going to pray a lot. I'll pray about this job. I'll pray about this opportunity, whatever. But on these little things, I'll do that myself. God doesn't want that. God says, give it all to me. This life is going to be hard. Give it all to me. And when you do, when you free yourself from that burden, then you are able to think more clearly. You're able to think more logically. You're able to think more along the lines of what He's told us to do, and so that you can be pleasing to God. David, and then Jason.
What the author brings out here that says that pride is an exaggerated view of one's own self-worth. We think we're better than we really are. And we think that's on us. And then you talk about pride before destruction. When I have an exaggerated view of myself, I do and say things without considering the long-term consequences of our actions. And that can be one statement. I can make one statement and destroy a person. But I didn't really think about the long-term effect, the emotional effect of that which it came out of my mouth or my actions. And pride raises us above other people. It causes us to say things that are detrimental and therefore in life that destruction.
Yeah, I think and it says in Proverbs 29:23, that passage, man's pride will bring him low, but the humble in spirit will retain honor. This idea that, the prideful have an over-exaggerated view of themselves, that's the view that everybody else sees oftentimes too, is this exaggerated view of themselves. And it tarnishes your ability to be able to talk to them about a lot of things when someone has pride that is that apparent. Yep, Jason?
Our society is shifting more and more, and I think it affects our younger generation more and more, is that idea that you pursue your self-interest. You're the most important thing in the universe. What you want, don't let anything stop you to get what you want, what makes you feel good, what you think is the best course of action. You pursue it, don't let anybody turn you off of that. And you can accomplish anything if you put your mind to it. You can't. I'm about to put a short kid in the NBA. I'm not gonna. I can't do that.
Yeah.
You need to realize the limitations. People with kids may have seen a show called Bluey. There was this episode where he was talking to the kids, and he said, "You remember when I told you when you were a little kid that you were the best and the greatest?" And well, you're not.
Yeah.
We need to realize that God is not a respecter of persons, whether you're pretty or tall or short or whatever. That has no bearing on worth.
Yeah. Carla? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 That's the fact that thunder got brought up and it wasn't by me. Uh, I didn't think that was going to happen, but yeah, that's a good point. Um, we'll start there on point number 3 at the problems of pride on Wednesday. I appreciate your